Hello, everyone. Happy May. I hope you all are doing well. I was so excited to have you here. This is Perfecta's fifth monthly webinar. We started hosting these monthly webinars in January to really have conversations that center our experiences as HR people, talent, DEI leaders in the workplace. And we want to be able to provide you all with some resources that you're able to take back to your organizations to build healthy, safe, and inclusive workplaces. With that being said, we know that May is all about mental health. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I also don't want to forget it's also AAPI Awareness Month too. But for today's conversation, which is extremely timely, we're going to focus on how companies can really embed mental health support into DE&I people strategies. In layman's terms, what I'm saying here is that we want to help you all to build a workplace that does promote and advocate for your employees' mental well-being. We are in a time now where a good chunk of Americans are facing depression, anxiety, tons of mental health challenges. I just saw a recent research report that was released stating some of those numbers. And we are no longer working from home. What we've seen through this pandemic is that our work and our lives are combined, right? We're not working from home, we're living at work. There is no way that we can separate who we are outside of work to who we are at work. And what we've seen as well as through this pandemic is that it has really heightened, a certain sensitivity and awareness to the mental health challenges that do exist. If you are yourself navigating your own mental health challenges, thank you for being here. If you are looking for resources to support your company's policies, programming for your employees, thank you for being here. If you are maybe a manager and you're wanting to support your teams on navigating mental health and starting to have these conversations in the workplace, trust me, you are in the right place. With that being said, please continue to say hello in the chat. We want to know who all is here in the Zoom room. We have folks all over the states, from Texas to Colorado to Iowa. Do we have anybody in the South? I am in Atlanta, Georgia, by way of North Carolina. We got London in the house. Fantastic. Fun fact, I will be in London next week to see Beyonce live. So I'm going to the Renaissance store in London. Cannot wait. We also have Columbia and Milwaukee here as well. So thank you all so much. St. Lucia, what? That is a vacation bucket list location for me. So thank you all for being here. Okay, Camilla, I'm going to see you. We're going to be in the Renaissance fan club together. But anyways, I don't want to make this about Beyonce because I can get very off track. Let me tell you all a little bit about Perfeqta and what we do. If you're new to us, so Perfeqta is short for Performance, Equity, and Talent. Our goal is to help build high-performing teams and put equity back into talent. We don't believe that the work is done until the most marginalized employee at the organization feels emotionally and psychologically safe. Now, how do we support our client partners through this? We do this through consulting, training, and coaching. We've done a lot of work on helping our client partners launch and build diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic roadmaps, helping our client partners launch formal DE&I governance structures, such as diversity councils, committees, supporting employee resource groups. I work directly with talent, HR, people leaders on building out these strategies as well through advising. And in the last year, we facilitated over 20 trainings to corporate clients to over 2,000 participants. And I'm sure this number has certainly went up since I was thinking about this. And then we do a lot of talks on topics like today, anything around DEI strategy, as well as allyship, bias, privilege, as well as inclusive leadership manager trainings as well. So that is a little bit about what we do. And then to introduce myself, my name is Letitia Bird. If I have not had the pleasure of meeting you, again, welcome. Thank you for being here. Please connect with me on LinkedIn as well. But I am the CEO of Perfeqta, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Dr. Tamra. I have a background in a variety of talent, people, and DEI experiences. I started my career in talent acquisition in the accounting world. Also led a lot of DE&I programming, partnerships, efforts, and I have been running Perfeqta now for almost a decade. I'm also an executive coach. So I do get to coach and work with executives that are leading some phenomenal companies. And without trying to think, am I leaving anything else? Another fun fact is I have a cat. I'm a pet mom. His name is Nipsey Hussle. That is my little baby. He's not little, he's like 20 pounds. But that is just a fun fact about me. And again, excited to meet you all.
Well, good afternoon if you're East Coast like me, but good morning if you're still on Pacific time. Joining us, as Letitia already mentioned, I'm Dr. Tamra Dias. On the Perfeqta team, I serve as the Director of External Learning Solutions, which is just a fancy way of saying I make clients' learning dreams come true. Typically our client partners will come to us with a goal, or maybe not even a goal, maybe just 3 random ideas with how they want to train and support their teams or their employees. And I take whatever they dump from their brains and I create learning strategy to help those come to life. My background is in DEI education across both corporate and nonprofit sectors. Before joining Perfeqta, I had 7+ years of experience as CEO, supporting over 14,000 constituents, specifically in the area of advancing equity. And so I have a lot of experience across different industries, supporting both employees as well as external stakeholders, getting buy-in around DEI, having difficult conversations, and then making change, which is really why we're all here, not just to listen to what sounds good, or not just to talk about theory, but to put it into practice and make actionable change. And so I'm super excited to be here with y'all. I never take it lightly when people join us during the day, because I know y'all probably have a growing to-do list of things that you're doing. So we're always thankful when you say, yes, I'm going to take time out and join Perfeqta and listen to what they have to say. So we're hoping that today is beneficial for you. The chat is open. So, if we say something that resonates with you, go ahead and give us a hand clap, give us a thumbs up. If you have questions, we'll hopefully have time at the end for Q&A as well. But again, welcome. And we're excited to jump into this super important and relevant topic with you all.
So why are we here today? I'm going to share some stats with you all, just to kind of ground us in why this topic is timely and important. According to a Workable report, about 62% of respondents said that workplace mental health is already a priority for their employers, and 24% will prioritize mental health in their company going forward. However, there are barriers. Not all employees feel comfortable talking about mental health at work, and not all employers know how to address these concerns in a meaningful and practical way. Right. So even though companies are saying they care about their employees' mental well-being and it's important to them, employees aren't necessarily seeing that aligning with action, with policy, and with programming. So we're going to give you all a ton of tips on what you can do and really start to implement into your company sooner than later. It does not matter how small, how large your organization is. It does not matter if you are aware or even not aware of your employees' mental health. These are things that you can start doing that is going to benefit everyone across your organization. So we are going to talk about some of those challenges that you or your team might be facing. And then we'll spend some time unpacking the role of leaders and managers in supporting mental wellness at work. The number one reason employees leave companies is not because of pay. It's not because they don't like the work. It is because of their direct relationship with their manager. So that being said, managers, people leaders, we have to make sure we are supporting our employees, not just with the work, but them as human beings. It is time for us to humanize the work. Let's not forget that we're working with people, right? We're not working with robots. We're working with people that have feelings, that have emotions, that some days they are barely signing into that Zoom to join that meeting. They may be struggling to self-advocate because they're not confident, right? You as their manager have an obligation. And at Perfecta, we have trained hundreds of leaders. We've coached hundreds of leaders. Guess what? Just because someone gets promoted into a people leader role doesn't mean that they're prepared to lead well. But guess what? If you're here today, I am going to assume that you really care about how you're showing up as a leader or how the leaders within your company are showing up. And that leadership skill set to better manage your employees, that can be nurtured and that can be developed. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go into your next one-on-one with your direct report and say, okay, tell me all about your mental health, right? That's not how it's going to happen. So I'm going to give you some tips on how you can start to open up the dialogue. Again, you want to make sure you're building a culture, an environment, a relationship of emotional and psychological safety, right? And that just doesn't happen overnight. Okay, so you do want to be sensitive to how you're navigating these conversations. And there also should be some accountability at the top on how leadership teams are creating structures, creating systems and policies that will allow you as a leader to show up for your employees. So I hope that today you'll leave with an action step or two that you can start to implement going forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Letitia, for that overview. And again, as she mentioned, if you're here, we take that as a sign that you care. It doesn't mean that you're doing everything perfect or everything right, because there's always space to learn and grow. But just being here and saying that this is an area of importance for you, that you at least want to deepen your learning or deepen your understanding or lead with some strategies is really important and valuable, especially as you continue to grow. I want to share this quote from Alex Gourlay, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the Walgreens Boots Alliance. And I think a lot of times as leaders, whether you are somebody who's a manager, whether you're somebody who may be senior leadership or even executive leadership, we all know that when you transition into leadership, you shift away from kind of the day-to-day tasks of maybe being involved directly in the work, and you're more so responsible for developing teams, developing other people, and maybe even strategy. So you're creating strategy, you're following up on it. And as you move into higher levels of leadership, the more pressure you get about achieving business outcomes, whether that's revenue, whether you work in a space where you're bringing in clients, whoever your main stakeholder is in whichever industry you are, the more you move up into leadership, the more pressure you have around business objectives. And so it's easy to get focused on, am I focused on the business objectives? Am I looking at the revenue? And to get really drawn into those external outcomes. And it's understandable, right? Because the finances and the health of the business is what's going to allow your career to grow and allow people to remain in the company long term. But what happens is that in that quest for business success on the finance side, a lot of leaders shift away from the focus on people. And not just people who clock in and did they do what they were supposed to do and did they get you the email or the document on time, but people as whole humans. And so Alex shares that specifically when you focus on health and well-being within your business strategy, it reminds you that not only are people your best asset, but it ultimately gets you towards your goal. When we stop separating kind of like, oh, well, we care about people, but then business is over here. When you stop separating them as two completely different areas of business, you'll realize that you really can't have one without the other. I'm sure we can all think of places where we have worked, whether it was maybe earlier in our careers, maybe you're there now, or maybe not you directly, but someone that you know who has been in a workplace that has not been healthy, that has not promoted their overall positive well-being. 99% of the time when that happens, you don't show up as your best self at work. It impacts your productivity. It impacts your investment. It impacts your engagement. You're less likely to do your best work when your well-being is not prioritized. And so I love this quote because I think it helps frame for us that it's not just about, oh, well, now that the business is doing well, or now that I've achieved everything, I can go back and look at people. Really focusing on overall well-being and creating the opportunity to say, we value you as a person. We really want to create a safe space for you. It will ultimately help the business. And at Perfeqta, we've done countless trainings where we remind people that pouring into your teams is not, oh, this is just nice. It's just something that we can do on the side. It is absolutely necessary. And mental health and well-being is not isolated from that. Ensuring that people have that safe space is important. And so super excited that this quote was highlighted by Alex and that he was able to kind of share with other executives that a happy, healthy, and committed workforce is what helps companies, be at their best, and that you can't separate the two from overall just success of the organization. So Letitia shared already some stats with you from Workable. And I think it's so important that we remember that even though companies say they prioritize mental health, or they say we value you and we want to create a safe space, we see the discrepancy in the numbers where those actions aren't matching up with what they say, or they're creating a ton of programming, but they haven't actually built a culture to reinforce the programming. So I'm also sure you might be able to think of spaces you've been in where maybe an opportunity or a benefit was offered, but there really wasn't space for you to maximize it, right? Like as somebody who's been an educator, I can't tell you how many days went by where I was sick or I was sleep deprived and I didn't take PTO. It was available, but I never took it because I just felt like there were so many things on my plate that I didn't have room to breathe and I couldn't take that time away. And so it didn't mean that my employer wasn't offering it, right? Like they sent me this whole list and said, just log into the system, put your days in, we'll approve them. But I knew that the culture I was working in was not one that said, we prioritize well-being. So actually really take the PTO because your work can wait. It's not important. Take care of yourself. And so to, underscore that, I want to share a few more stats with you taken from that Workable report on mental health. I think when we look at the fact that over 90% of people have had mental health challenges that have impacted their work, we realize that nobody is exempt from needing support in this way. So this tells me that if I'm in, a workspace with 10 people, that 9 of us have had at some point a struggle or a challenge with our mental health that has shown up in our work and has impacted how effective we are or how productive we're able to be. Which to me is, again, going back to say that like supporting mental health is not just something we can do when it's fun or when it makes a cute like post or when people ask for it. But if 90% of people are struggling with it, it's almost something that has to be embedded into the culture and embedded into all the policies and practices that are displayed and that are enforced. Of the 90%, 65% of the people who identified as minorities, so people specifically who identify as people of color, were more likely to say that they had mental health challenges before 2020. So if you've been reading research, you'll notice this conversation has started recently since the pandemic. And if you were here earlier, Letitia opened us up by saying, now we're having this conversation, but it's one that we should have been having a long time ago. And when I look at this statistic, I think it's great that 2020 and beyond, employers have said, oh, we value mental health. What can we do? But we also recognize that 65% of the people who identify as minorities said, even before there was a pandemic, I was dealing with mental health challenges at work that impacted my ability to show up and to be my best self in the workplace. So this means we're not just dealing with something that happened because of the pandemic or happened in recent years. This has been an ongoing concern and an area of need. Within this, of all of the workplace stressors, so when asked, when you think about, mental health challenges or what brings on the most stress, what serves as a trigger for you in the workplace, the lack of work-life balance came in at over 70%, nearly 80% really, of people said because of the lack of work-life balance, which is really just being able to go to work and kind of leave work at work and have those boundaries where you can separate, or where you just feel like there is some sort of symmetry between your work responsibilities and then being able to have a life outside of work. Nearly 80% of people said this was their main stressor, not being able to do that, not having that balance. So again, it goes back to what we just said. Just because you have opportunities or benefits doesn't mean that you actually have a culture that reinforces it and says, we want you to have that balance. We want to create a safe space. In the chat, I would love for you to just drop a yes or a thumbs up or an I agree if any of these stats resonate with you, maybe with your own experience. Again, maybe when you first started your career, or maybe with somebody that you know, or are you a leader that has gotten feedback where somebody has said, hey, I don't really have a good work-life balance. It is a stressor for me. And you can identify with this. Okay, Russell says, absolutely yes. Joanna, have experienced them all myself. Same. Joanna, I completely agree. Unfortunately, I read this and was like, I think that they may have tapped into some of my past work experiences because these came up a lot for me. And definitely prior to 2020, mine were not just a result of the pandemic. They were definitely things that I dealt with. Nina, great point. I thank you for sharing that, you didn't have work-life balance in your early career. You were the only minority in your accounting department. And we could do a whole nother webinar on that. We'll have enough time, but often employees of color are the ones who feel like they don't have the balance because there is kind of that weight if you are the only one where you're trying to show up, you're doing all the things, you're joining all the committees, you're saying yes to all the tasks. And that could be really overwhelming and add to the existing stress of just your department or your industry. So thank you, for sharing in the chat. And hopefully as we go on and continue our conversation, some of the strategies and tips we share, you can either take away and implement or take them and reflect because you may already have some and just need to kind of reevaluate how they're being implemented.
And Tamara, I was going to add in quickly as well, kind of going along with Nina's point, all of those isms, racism, sexism, heterosexism, all the isms and the phobias and all of that, that definitely impacts how, people from historically excluded groups, show up at work. And so even in Perfeqta and with working with our clients to build DEI strategies and healthy workplace cultures, we've seen firsthand where employees start with the organization, they're excited to join, then they start to deal with microaggressions, again, all of the isms, taking on additional workloads, such as leading an ERG or supporting DE&I efforts, and that adding an additional, workload to the already 9 to 5. All of those things do directly impact mental health. And so mental health and DEI is really very much so adjacent. And it is important to just highlight how much your mental health is impacted on a deeper level if you are a part of a historically excluded group.
Thank you, Letitia. So if you are leading, you probably have seen some of these before. And even if you're someone who say, I may not be in a higher leadership position, you likely have encountered some of these challenges too. When it comes to overall well-being in the workplace, several things we want to highlight here. The biggest one, I think, if you've logged on to LinkedIn at all in the past 6 months, you likely have seen people sharing about layoffs, whether it is layoffs altogether or maybe company restructuring where their existing role was eliminated and maybe it had to transition into something else. But so many people right now are either working in spaces where restructuring is happening or they've had to look for other employment. And in this current, just climate in the workplace, a lot of people are facing increased workload, specifically after restructuring. And so I think we talk a lot about, we probably see a lot of posts about, people who are looking for roles or who may say, I was recently laid off. But a lot of times when roles are eliminated, the work doesn't necessarily go away. So, just because the company has said, we've decided to get rid of our HR team, It doesn't mean that the HR function itself no longer exists. What it usually results in is the remaining individuals having to take on and split up the work of the people who have been let go or who are no longer at the company. And so in addition to kind of already dealing with the, okay, we've gone through layoffs, I may have, I've lost a colleague who's no longer here. I'm having to kind of navigate the new normal at work post layoff or post restructuring. Now I also have to navigate adding more responsibilities to my plate. What does my day-to-day look like now that my role has shifted a little bit? And then also what that means for overall job security. So being thankful that, maybe you survived the layoff, like, maybe there were layoffs and I'm super fortunate that I'm here, but also just those feelings of uneasiness, of uncertainty. Back in February, Perfeqta facilitated a training with a client, and 3 days prior, they had just laid off probably like 1/4 of their company. And so we were coming in doing this webinar on engagement and relationships, having to, address them and build them up and support them, knowing that many of them were just kind of worried. They were a little bit anxious, and we sat and, and I sat and talked with their leadership team just to kind of get the overview about how we could support them moving forward. But there's a real, concern and worry when it comes to knowing that resources have been cut, knowing that restructuring is happening, and then just being worried about what's next. Again, people are so much more than just their job title and the task in front of them. They're people. And so emotionally, it's hard to navigate that phase of, just knowing that your company is shifting and knowing that things are changing. And so understanding that as an employer is super important, outside of just the, can you handle the work, but like, how are you as a person? How are you navigating these changes? We know that the change can be difficult and hard, and you probably have questions, and you may be questioning your own job security. Creating space to have that conversation, or just to even say, we don't have all the answers, but we care, is really important during this time. And I think moving forward as well, as people continue to try to make sense of everything that's going on. I also think it's really important to talk about the lack of career growth. And Letitia and I were just talking about this earlier this morning when it comes to supporting employees with like coaching and professional development and opportunities for them to enhance their skills. She and I both agree that this, again, is not something that's just a bonus. It shouldn't be, oh, you're our star employee, so let's reward you with opportunity for growth across the board. And I would probably even say, even for people who you may feel like they need more support, or maybe you've set an objective and they're struggling to meet it, those are not the people that you ignore and say, well, do better. And when you do better, we'll support you. Across the board, teams need that opportunity for career growth. And when they don't get it, in addition to that work-life balance that I mentioned earlier, lack of career growth is a huge stressor for people. Again, that uncertainty, when there's lack of clarity around where is your growth, where is your path. I've coached tons of people who have said, I've been working here and nobody's ever sat me down to say, here's the opportunity for me, here's where I can grow. And that can be really stressful and worrisome. But as leaders, we're not just tasked with managing people, we're also tasked with leading them, helping them figure out where they want to go, how they want to develop in their careers, and creating space for them to set vision for their career and where they want to go. When we combine these workplace challenges with the stress that people are facing, it can lead to physical health challenges, which I think goes back to saying, as whole people, we don't say like, oh, I'm just going to take off my hat now that I'm at work and I'm going to isolate everything else going on in my life. People can't do that. And so understanding that also makes us realize that when people leave work, if they're stressed, overwhelmed, tired, burnout, dealing with mental health challenges, it doesn't automatically disappear the minute they close their computer or when they log off of Zoom. It's going to manifest. And research has shown time and time again that it can show up physically. It can lead to headaches. It can lead to just overall fatigue, lack of energy, and more, scary, it's led to heart attacks and strokes for many people. And so it's really important to realize that when you are investing in well-being, you're doing so much more than just saying, I want to create this space for talking. You're actually building the foundation for overall health understanding that you're supporting the whole human and not just an employee. We always love to give you actual recommendations. So we want to highlight, again, not requirements by any means, but wanted to give you some ideas for what solutions could look like. Because we could talk all day about why mental health is important. We could talk all day about the changes you should make, but wanted to give you a couple of solutions that you may want to try or that you may want to implement or recommend in your workplace or in your environment. Xanda, is it Xanda or Zonda? I want to highlight what you mentioned about deactivating LinkedIn because it was negatively impacting your mental health. Kudos to you for recognizing it. I think it can be really hard, especially because LinkedIn is a professional platform and feeling like I got to be on LinkedIn. I have to be posting. I need to know what people are doing. But for you to recognize like it's not a healthy tool for you is huge. And to set that boundary is really important because setting boundaries with social media is hard, whether it's personal or professional. So shout out to you for being able to, set that boundary for you and creating space for that. So here's just a few recommendations for what companies have done. So everything that we're recommending is something that we know works well, either based on what we've done at Perfeqta or what our clients who are doing great work, supporting their teams, supporting their employees, what they are doing. The first is a mental health day policy. And at Perfeqta, we have a mental health day policy. We've had it for almost a year. And simply put, it is a policy that gives employees the opportunity to take a day for their mental wellness, mental health. And the key here is without question. So they don't need to submit, a doctor's note or a paragraph explanation or call you and give you the scoop or the update. But specifically, they just kind of put in, I'm taking a mental health day, and that's it. No questions asked. Do want to encourage you that, of course, there's opportunity there to support. So if you're in the space and maybe you have mental health day policy or you have people who take them, simply like approving it and just maybe, saying like, here for you if you need anything, or let me know if you need to support, I'll see you when you get back, or I'll check in with you when you get back, is a great way just to say I'm here. Without feeling like I need to know why, because you shouldn't need to know the why, but it does, again, create that space to say, if anything has popped up, if you do need support from me, if you have questions, before you take your day, let me know and I'm here. The second is a coaching and or mentoring program. And you saw on the previous slide that lack of career growth is a huge cause of stress for many people in the workplace. And so we've had several clients that have either partnered with us with Perfeqta's Coach Circle. We have a team of coaches who support senior and executive level employees, as well as entry to mid-level employees, really across the board, and give them dedicated coaching to not just how can they show up at work better, but how are they growing and developing their skill set. And then mentoring programs are super important because giving people, that older support in the company, and not just older in terms of age, but maybe somebody who just has more knowledge because they've been at the company longer or they've been in the industry longer. Creating that opportunity for mentoring is an amazing way to reach back and to build relationships in the workplace. You're building their community and you're giving them an extension of support. As a manager or supervisor, you can't do everything for a person. And so coaching and mentoring are two great ways where you can enhance that community, because it does take more than just one person to really support someone's growth in the workplace. Family leave, I've seen a huge increase just in what companies are doing for family leave. And within family leave, want to highlight here that it doesn't say parental leave, because family leave incorporates not just people who have stepped into the role of parent, but people who are caregiving. And as somebody who recently transitioned into caregiving in the previous few months, I can tell you that even just navigating that space is super challenging and difficult. It feels like a full-time job most days. And so family leave recognizes that whether you're caring for a family member, whether that's your child, a parent, an aunt, a grandparent, whoever it is, we recognize that in order to be your best self, we need to create space for you to focus on family and dedicate time to that. And as somebody who's facing that currently, I can't tell you how important it is and how necessary it is. A lot of companies have EAP programs, employee assistance programs, and this is where you can get telehealth access to therapy. Usually you can get like a video opportunity sometimes, and a lot of companies will have 24/7 access. So whether you are at work or you're at home, you can usually get access through an employee access assistance program to have direct access to a mental health professional. Wellness weeks are becoming popular as well. I'm seeing it a lot in startup communities, specifically in those high growth, fast paced environments where companies are providing a full week of paid vacation for all employees. And this really just looks like unplugging, taking time away. Some companies will kind of do a wellness week across the board. So everybody at the company will take a wellness week. Other companies may choose to stagger it. But again, I think wellness weeks are important because it shows from the top down that I'm not just going to tell you to take time off or take a break, but we're going to set a policy that all of us are going to take a break. Because if you're like me, again, it can be really hard to say I need a break or I need to step away until somebody tells you take a break or step away, or until somebody models I'm taking a break so that you know it's safe and it's okay for you to take a break as well. And so if a wellness week is a little bit of a reach for you and you're thinking, okay, I like the concept, but not possible, you can try a wellness day. I know companies that will do a wellness Friday or, make 2 Fridays a month during the summer as wellness days. Some people will give wellness blocks. So maybe they'll offer an afternoon where you can just take the afternoon and have a break, do something to support your wellness. But starting and creating just one small opportunity will then give you the foundation to enhance it. And then the last one is a mental health affinity group. And we love ERGs, employee resource groups at Perfeqta. We help companies create and sustain their ERGs long-term. And you could create a mental health employee group specifically to promote well-being and create a safe space where members can talk about their mental health without feeling like it's a taboo topic, or without feeling like, they have to address the stigmas associated with it. And really also use it as an opportunity to educate people on challenges of mental health. Even though they may not be dealing with a challenge themselves, they may just need to understand how to support colleagues who may be dealing with it. Joanna, you implemented your own mental health day policy about 5 years ago. Y'all are crushing it today with the boundaries. I'm loving the ways that you all have shared, you've advocated for yourself and set those boundaries. So kudos to you, Joanna, because it's super hard to just say, I'm going to take ownership and set the boundary myself rather than wait for somebody else to do it. And Tamika, love that your company has Refresh Me Fridays, and love that it's encouraged to use it per quarter and its addition to PTO. And I love anything with a cute name. So I love that they've named it and it's not just a regular Friday, but that they call it Refresh Me Fridays. I would take it just because it sounds cute. I would do it. And then Nina, you have 2 days per year for activism and wellness. I worked for an employer before where we had, I think it was 3 days a year for activism, wellness, and then volunteering as well. So if we wanted to take time and be involved in a civic cause or give back, we could take that day. And again, it was in addition to PTO without question. We just had to kind of submit and say, if we were volunteering or doing something, we had to sign up that way. But wellness, we could just take whatever we needed. And again, all of these, do not feel like you should go back and start all 6 of them immediately. Maybe you look at one of the 6 and you see where there's opportunity. Maybe it is building in a Refresh Me Friday or a refresh lunch hour or afternoon. Maybe it is starting the conversation around coaching and mentoring and seeing if within the next year you can build out a dedicated program for it, or at least do some research and maybe bring in elements of coaching and mentoring within the organization. But one small thing is what I encourage people to do, and then continue to build from there.
Love all the discussion happening in the chat. Thank you, Dr. Tamra, for those tips and guidance as well. And so now we're going to shift the conversation into what can leaders and managers do. The first thing is to normalize the conversation. You need to create space for employees to be able to have a healthy dialogue about this. As a manager, you can start the conversation by sharing your own experiences and challenges with mental health, of course, to your level of comfort. But something that we always like to remind leaders when we host trainings is that as a leader, we have to role model inclusive behavior. We have to role model vulnerability. And by us doing that, that will allow others to be able to be more vulnerable. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. You can show up as a leader confidently while also being vulnerable. So that is something to really keep in mind. What I have learned, I've been a CEO for almost a decade, right? And what I've learned is that as a CEO, as someone who has to have it all together all the time, sometimes I don't. And the times, the situations where I reflect on how I was vulnerable and I opened up about my own mental health challenges, that really brought humanity into the relationship, even with the folks on my team, even within my friendships and relationships. And y'all, all of this is not just relevant to the workplace, but even thinking about how we're showing up in all of our relationships. Vulnerability is key, right? I also just want to add here is that I know that there is a stigma around not talking about mental health. So encourage your employees to seek help, ask them if they have mental health support. Don't say, hey, you really need to go to therapy. Like, ooh, that's too much for me. I'm not saying you should say that, but asking them, have you thought about therapy? Have you considered it? Or what I love to do is, even with my executive coaching clients, is to say, here's what my experience with therapy, here's what my experience with getting mental health support has looked like, and here's how it helped me. What have you considered? What resources have you tapped into? And that's going to open up the conversation from there. Okay. I love to talk about therapy, and my team knows as well. I have an hour of therapy blocked on my calendar every week. We share our calendar, so it's pretty open what we're doing. And so my team knows Letitia's in therapy this week. I have other team members that also have their weekly therapy appointments on their calendar as well. So therapy is a regular conversation here. Also connect your employees to resources. So Tamara did mention EAP. That will likely cover or may cover counseling services, mental health support groups, therapy. But you know what we have found, even with our clients at Perfeqta, is that even if your company has these benefits, policies that you're offering, sometimes your employees aren't aware. Look at your onboarding process. Are you ensuring that your employees are aware of those benefits once they join the organization? And for those that have been at the organization, do you have a communication strategy in place where you are reminding them of the benefits? One of our client partners, I was just at dinner with their head of social impact last week. And they have about 1,200 employees. And she said that they just hosted a webinar about the benefits that are available, where all of the employees could join and learn more. So definitely get creative on communicating that out. Prioritize work-life balance. So you do want to encourage a healthy work-life balance. As Tamara mentioned, that's one of the number one stressors that is causing us to be stressed at work, is not having that healthy work-life balance. So promote flexible work arrangements, offering time off for personal or family needs, setting clear expectations around work hours and workload. And again, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, is to lead by example if you are a people manager or a leader. Do you have clear work hours? Emailing your employees late at night, don't do that. Can you schedule that email to go out in the morning, right? Sometimes what I'll do even here at Perfeqta is I might be working late and I'll Slack the team and say, hey, you might see some emails come through for me. Maybe I'm taking a late flight for some work travel. Please ignore it until tomorrow. Or my number one kind of go-to is if I'm working late, I'm just going to schedule that email to go out in the morning. Because sometimes when your employees, your direct reports see an email coming in late at night, they're going to go to sleep thinking about that email. So be mindful of that. Respect work schedules. Okay. If someone says they are done at 6, why are you calling them at 6:30 saying, hey, there's a work fire, I need you to help me put it out? Can it wait until the next day? Respect time zones. And I want to call that out. I know we have folks here that are in London and Kenya, St. Lucia, all over, Cali, West Coast to East Coast. People are on different time zones. And so be mindful of how and when you're scheduling meetings, requesting things by a certain time. Respect folks' time zones. We are all over the world in different countries, time zones, regions, states. I also want to add here is to make sure that your employees are taking PTO. At Perfeqta, we have minimum PTO requirements. So, and I also will check in with the team and say, hey, you have not taken PTO in a while. Take some time off, please. Not even just for you, but for me too, because I might need a break. But what I've noticed is that when our teams or when our colleagues take PTO, even for me, taking PTO and coming back, they're feeling a bit more rejuvenated, more productive, instead of trying to push and work through that burnout. It's not healthy. Okay. If you're a leader and you are taking PTO, of course, you want to make sure you're modeling that. Are you working on PTO? Because if you're taking PTO, but you're working, are you creating an environment where your employees feel not even safe to take PTO, but safe to completely unplug when they are taking PTO? And the last point on here is to look at responsibilities. So consider on your team who might be overworked and also overlooked. Remember, again, it's not just about the work, it is about people. So the goal is to be proactive in supporting your employees. Don't wait until something happens. Create a safe space for them to be open and vulnerable about their challenges. Also know, as a leader, this is not a one-time conversation, right? So you want to make sure you are continuing to find ways to get feedback, whether it's ongoing in your one-on-ones. Not every one-on-one, you don't need to say, hey, how's your mental health today? Unless y'all have that level of closeness. But companies can also conduct surveys. You can host focus groups, encourage feedback. And we can move on to the next slide here, because one thing that we've done, and I want to just highlight someone who is really, really a phenomenal leader in this space, is we have brought in guest speakers that are mental health experts and have years of working in that mental health space to come in and talk about how do you prioritize your emotional well-being. So I want to shout out Mina B. She's not here on the Zoom today, but her name on Instagram is MINAA and then B. She's a phenomenal mental health leader. She came in and talked to our team about a year ago on how we can just be proactive in supporting our own mental health. And she also does tons of trainings for leaders and managers on how to support their employees. So maybe that's something that you all can consider, is bringing in an expert to provide that education. If, you know, there is, of course, that level of discomfort that comes with talking about it. I've already mentioned the next one, but encouraging leaders to open up, asking your employees what they need. Don't assume that you know what your employees need. Ask them what they need. Do they need a day off? Do we need to look at your responsibilities and reprioritize, deprioritize things? Do they need more support? Do they need someone being an advocate or an ally for them in a meeting, right? And then the last one here is to make sure that with all of the changes, things that you all may be taking back to your organization, fingers crossed, after today, make sure you update your employees regularly on what changes are being made. On a monthly basis, leaders can highlight which mental resources are currently available, what's to come, and how your employees can share feedback on the things that you're implementing to make sure that it works for your organization.
We always talk about psychological safety, and really the importance of creating workplace environments where people feel safe to show up as their full selves, safe to, share their feelings and what's on their minds. And so Amy C. Edmondson wrote a book called The Fearless Organization, which talks about what psychological safety is. And specifically within a psychologically safe workplace, people are not hindered by interpersonal fear. They feel willing and able to take the inherent interpersonal risks of candor. They fear holding back their full participation more than they fear sharing a potentially sensitive, threatening, or wrong idea. And so when we think about psychological safety, we've probably all been in situations where we want to speak up, or we want to share what's on our mind, or we want to ask a question about something that we're concerned about, but we worry about the risks. And in true safe workplaces, we fear the outcome of not asking or not getting support rather than asking and then having to deal with kind of the feedback or the response on the other end. And so as leaders, really want to encourage you to focus on that open communication, listening actively, and embracing diversity, knowing that everybody's coming from different backgrounds and has different experiences. And so embracing that diversity in their background and also diversity in thought to create spaces that are truly safe.
So I know we have just a couple of minutes or 4 minutes left. So if you do have questions, please drop those questions in the Q&A so that we can begin to answer some of those questions. Just wanted to highlight a few themes that we talked about here is that it is key for companies to support the whole person and not just their work. So the employee first, okay? Next is to make sure that there are environments to have this open discussion. And also, you want to make sure that your employees are feeling supported, because when your employees are supported, they're engaged, they're productive, right? They're going to support you if you're supporting them. It is a two-way street. And so if you are looking for resources, if you're looking for trainings, inclusive leadership trainings, allyship trainings, trainings that will help you build emotional and psychological safety at your company, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here at Perfeqta. You can reach out to myself or Dr. Tamara. We're both on LinkedIn. And can also drop a link to our website. So you can submit a contact form. We'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing to support your employees, how you're building diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies and programming, and how there might be an opportunity for us to come in and support. So try to go through as many questions as we can. But let's see what we have here. So there's a question, anonymous question, which says, what are your thoughts around changing the label from mental health to mental fitness? I feel like health is more of a current state. Fitness is a routine. There may be bad days, great days, but there is a goal at the end that you're working towards, and it's a journey to get here. Do you want to answer that, Tamara? Would you like me to?
I'll take a shot at it. I think anytime you switch language or change language, you should have a why. You should have a reason behind it. Because I think I've been in places where acronyms have popped up or people have, coined phrases that sounded nice, but there really wasn't a need or, didn't need to, make that, there wasn't a reason behind it. So it sounds like just based on what you've submitted that you've thought about it and you've put a lot of thought into it. I'm also a fan of anytime the language changes, maybe like beta testing it and maybe getting feedback. So sharing it with a few people and seeing how they feel about it. Specifically when, supporting employees or within the workplace. I think when we shift language without like clear communication of the why and what it is, people might get confused on like, well, what exactly do you mean by mental fitness? What does it include? Is it mental health? Is it well-being? What exactly are you trying to say? It makes me think of just DEI and all the terms that people kind of create on their own within the DEI space. So I definitely think that there's opportunity to develop it, but maybe opening it up for feedback to see what the initial kind of reaction is before making it, maybe jumping in and saying, great, we're going to do away with mental health altogether and call it mental fitness. Maybe get some feedback first and see what people think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if that is a term that you decide to adopt at your organization, of course, getting feedback, educating, making sure that folks are aware and understand what that truly means. I love the term mental fitness. I've heard it before from a mental health expert on a podcast. And, the cool thing about the fitness piece is that it does relate to a journey, a progress. And when you think about building your mental gym, you think about like, what does that mean, right? For if you are into fitness, you'll have some free weights, you might have a kettlebell, you might have, your bench, right? Different things that you're using to build that physical fitness. So with the mental fitness, it's also thinking about what are the different tools, resources that I need to use to become emotionally fit. And that could be, therapy, that could be boundaries, that could be journaling, it's all those things that can build it. So, again, language is important as long as everyone's aligned on it. There's a purpose of it. It definitely can be something, effective and beneficial. So thank you for that question. We are unfortunately at time. Wow, that flew by. If we did not get to your question, please reach out to us. And I also just want to drop our email in the chat if you do have any questions about how to get in touch with our team. Of course, it is here on the slide. I will also drop my LinkedIn in here as well. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to support. We love supporting companies that are looking to create healthy workplace cultures. If that's you, then I hope to be chatting with you soon about your goals. And again, just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Dr. Tamara, is there anything else you want to add?
Nothing from me. Thank you all for joining. Hopefully we gave you some good tips and recommendations, and please feel free to connect with us so we can keep the conversation going.
Thank you all. Have a good day.